Well, welcome back to the 60th episode of the Backpacking Psychonaut. In today's episode, we're gonna discuss the lessons I've learned from 2023. So this is going to be a recap of all the most important lessons I've learned. And for me, 2023 has been such a massive year of growth, as every year seems to compound and grow, and I seem to get better and better. But this year especially has been one of probably the best year of my life. I would especially say the first half of the year was so incredibly enlightening and so important in my perspective that it really has changed and shifted the way I see reality and see the identification of who is Alex Rogers. So for those that don't know, I went traveling this year. I've been wanting to do it for ages, and it was finally I took the first step and went out and traveled, visited 12 different countries, and it changed everything about how I see the world. It really gave me this fire to want to go out and achieve more, so I can go and explore more. And yeah, they're currently working at Marks and Spencer's at the end of the year, which is not where I want to be, in my parents' house. And it's quite mad how I started off the year like traveling in Bali, Thailand. I was living in Australia, and now I'm back in my parents' house working at a supermarket, which is exactly where I didn't want to be at the end of this year when I started 2023. But I think it's a necessary step in my journey, and I'm really looking forward to 2024. I think with the mindset I'm in right now and the perspective I'm slowly building up, I think big things are going to happen for me sooner or later. Just need to stay consistent, keep overcoming these little insecurities I have and these little self-limiting beliefs. I'm going to talk about this more in the lessons I've learned, but I seem to look at the negatives about myself. I've got very self-limiting beliefs, a lot of self-doubt, and it's hard. It is hard being me sometimes. My mind can be very negative, but yeah, I feel like I am slowly deep rooting that. I'm building a deeper sense of confidence in myself. And I hope that continues and grows. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So the lessons I've learned in 2023. The first one is intuition versus logic. Follow the whisper of God. So I've always been, from reading philosophy and self-improvement and watching a lot of content on YouTube, I always try to rationalize things, and I still do. I get very stuck in my head where I can intellectualize everything. And we have two parts of our mind and our body, which is we have the very logical, rational way of perceiving things. That's where you see a situation and you think, right, what is the best course of action? Let's get a positive outcome and a negative outcome. Let's write down all the good things about me taking this action and all the bad things about me taking this action, and let's weigh them up and let's calculate what will be the best action to take. That would be a very logical way of looking at situations. Whereas your intuition is more of a feeling. It's more of, right, this feels good. This probably goes against the grain of what people are saying. Maybe logically it doesn't make sense, but I feel like this is the right way for me to go. I feel like I really connect with this person. I feel like I should go out and do this thing. I should go and get a new job, even though I'm getting paid really well. So your intuition's kind of telling you what makes you feel good and what doesn't feel good. So it's kind of the difference between rationalizing and intellect versus feeling and connectedness. And both have importance. Obviously, logic and being rational has given the westernized societies massive improvements in technology, has massive improvements in medicine, and has got us to a point where we're living in this society where we're stripping people out of poverty. We're advancing so quick. We've got this AI boom that's going on. We're doing some crazy things right now, and a lot of that comes from our intellect, our ability to look at things logically and rationalize things and come up with ways that we can overcome them. So it's good in a sense, but what happens is you can follow your logic too much. You can get so self-absorbed in your ability to try and rationalize everything that you start stripping away actually your feelings and emotions. And if you really think of intuition, right, it's a bit of a crazy thing. And I read Robert Greene Mastery not long ago. I've read it for the third time. And he's talking about how the whole goal in becoming a master at something, if you look at a Leonardo da Vinci, or if you look at a Charles Darwin, people who have mastered their craft, maybe a Floyd Mayweather, the whole goal is to cultivate a sense of spontaneity in what they do. So they train really hard, they research, they study, they do all these things with diligent, logical practice, but it's all with the end goal of trying to cultivate a spontaneity that is effortless. It's to build that intuition. So I see your intuition as calculations and observations of the work you're putting in. You're building up a skill set. You're building something up to allow your mind to come up with new ideas and abstract and act in ways that you couldn't logically think of. So I always feel like the logic is a training ground for intuition. And when I say follow the whisper of God, I feel like if you can get still enough and if you can really get quiet and listen to your intuition knows where you need to go. It knows your deepest desires. It knows your deepest insecurities, your anxieties. It knows what you need to do. But we get so caught up in the logical, rational mind of trying to comprehend things that we drown out the intuition. So when I say follow the whisper of God, I'm saying that your intuition, what feels right for you, what actually might not make sense in a logical, rational way, is actually where you need to go, because it's the cultivation of all your life's work, all your deep desires, all your emotional well-being. Everything is built up there in your intuition. If you can really follow that and allow your intuition to flow through, then you're going to live a life more aligned with what you actually want. Because logic shows and logic explains that you should work 18 hours a day, 19 hours a day. You should do a load of things for money. You should then free up your time and blah, blah, blah. Do all these things. That's all logic talking. And whilst they are good things, your intuition might be telling you that, like, lads, you might actually just be happy with a small life. Like, you might just want a wife and a kids and maybe a 9 to 5 job. And you follow your passions and you do this and you do that. Your intuition might be telling you that. Your intuition might be telling you that, like, look, I need to go and speak to loads of women right now. Instead of like focusing on making loads of money, I need to do loads of personal growth. Or maybe your intuition is telling you, look, I need to earn money right now. Like, what is that feeling that you feel like you need to do, that burn and desire? Because that is your highest point of action right now. That's your highest potential that you could achieve to. And your intuition is trying to take you there. But the logical, rational mind is cultivated by what you've learned, what you've read, other people's perspectives. So you can kind of look at logic and logical, rational mind and intuition in like a couple different ways. But yeah, I think as I get older and maybe reading some of the Taoist philosophy has kind of propelled me into this way of thinking, is that the universe is a crazy, crazy thing. And who's to say that I'm creating the universe and I'm manifesting my reality? Maybe reality is manifesting in me, and maybe I need to just step out of the way of the ego. Maybe I need to step away from the identification of Alex Rogers and kind of just follow the intuition, follow the flow of life. The Taoists would call it Wu Wei, which is effortless action. Action without effort. Stop trying. Don't think, do. So yeah, that's my thoughts on intuition versus logic. The next is time dilation, how time is formed by perception. And this is starkly something from my experience I felt as I was traveling. So I worked in Morrison's for 5 years, and it was continuous doing the same thing day in, day out. And I think this point in my life was needed because I was so socially anxious. I was so addicted to like drinking and drugs that I needed to do a lot of internal work. Like I needed to like build some discipline, get into a routine, build the foundations for the person that could later then go off and explore. But one thing I noticed when I was working in Morrison's and I was working in the grind and my life was very mundane is that life was just flashing by. Every week was going past like a day, and I was just stuck in this loop of doing the same things over and over again. It's like I couldn't grasp time, like I couldn't quite hold onto the moment and make the most of it because everything was going so quick. And as I've come back from traveling and I've come back into M&S and I'm working in retail again, I'm noticing the same thing, that the habit and the mundane of life, like the routine of just doing the same things over and over again, stops your perception of time. Because the reason this is because once you do something so continuously, it becomes automatic in your brain. So your brain wants to do the the least amount of work. So if it knows that you're doing something, neurologically, it can flip that into an automatic process so you don't have to consciously think about it, because we need as much conscious awareness as possible to observe our environment and to like observe social situations. So anything that your brain can turn into a habit, anything that is continuous and you do often, your brain will flip the switch of conscious awareness and put it onto unconscious. So when you're going into the same places and you're having the same conversations, you're doing the same things over and over again, your mind has done that so often that it's learned to turn the process into automatic. It's turned into a habit. So now you're not thinking about it, you're just doing. Let's think about it in the morning, right? Do you think about going to brush your teeth, or do you just get in the shower and then brush your teeth? That's become a habit. You don't have to think about it, and it's very hard to be consciously aware when you're brushing your teeth. It's just a habit you get up and do. So that happens in life. And I had this stark realization as when I went to travel, when I landed in Bali, everything was so new. Everything was out of my comfort zone. I was deep in the borders of chaos, and time slowed down so drastically that it felt like 1 hour traveling was worth 10 in Cornwall working. And it's really funny how the dilation of time can slow down just because I'm perceiving a different environment and I'm putting myself in different situations. And if all we are is moments in time, you can have more of them moments and be aware of more of them moments by doing novel things. So this is why I mean time is perceived. Time is framed by our perception. And there's obviously a paradox to this, like you don't want to be constantly on chaos. You don't want to be constantly exploring new things because it can be very hard to have discipline. It can be very hard to keep anchored, but you need both, and you need to instill that you're doing new things and you're bringing that slower perception of time and that more present mindful attention into your life. So one thing I'm going to try and do in 2024 is go for weekends away to places. Like go and do something different, whether it's maybe like just sleep out in a tent somewhere, or go and book a weekend away, like to another country, or even just up country, go to a city, speak to new people, go out and socialize, do new events. Like if you're working the 9 to 5 grind, or if you're working a job, try and bring novel activities into your daily routine, because that is going to slow the perception of time, and you're going to have more time, more moments to enjoy this one thing that we have, which is human existence. We only get it once. You are only going to be you once. The existence of Alex Rogers, the existence of whoever is listening, is never going to happen again. And you have this one special moment where you can just appreciate and enjoy the finite amount of time that we have. And the more novel things, the more you can expose yourself to different experiences, the more you're going to appreciate this time as a human, and the more you're going to really appreciate the present moment. So that's my thoughts on time dilation, how time is framed by our perception. The next one is conversation is best when one stops trying. So I am as I said before, and this probably links into the intuition versus logic, I'm a very rational thinker. I like to intellectualize and think about things. You can probably tell as I'm sat on a podcast trying to abstract and think about everything in such complex, multifaceted ways that I'm constantly training the habit of my mind to intellectualize things. And when I'm in a conversation, just due to the nature of my mind in past being very socially anxious, it's not as much anymore. I've always tried to think of what is the best case scenario in a social situation. So I've always tried to perform to a certain extent. I'm always trying to think like, is this person, how can I get this person to perceive me in this way? Or what's this person thinking? I'm always trying to think things and like abstract and get the best out of everything I'm doing. And when I find it comes to social situations, the best form of conversations you have is that spontaneity where you're no longer stuck in your head and you're embodied, when you're really in that moment and you're just allowing yourself to step out of your ego's way and just have a natural conversation that flows and talks and hits with people's emotions. And the more you try with a conversation, the more you try to perform, the more it feels forced, and the more you try to like cultivate ideas of what to say next. I always find the best conversations the ones where like you're not thinking what to say next, you're just really interested in what that person's saying, and then you come up with something to say without thinking about it, because that person who's thinking, that person who's sat behind the eyes, who's sat behind your conscious experience, like trying to abstract and think, sometimes gets in the way, and you can force things. Like, I always think things come best when they're very natural and you kind of go into that flow state, and that is what intuition is. It's tapping into that flow state. So conversations are always more meaningful, they're always more connected, where you're not trying to perform or you're not trying anything. You're just doing it for the sake of the conversation, to listen to that person. So yeah, conversations is best when one stops trying. Next is the illusion of lack. Separateness, separation. Oh, mate, I can't talk. Being separate causes suffering. So at the start of the year, I read the Bhagavad Gita, which, for those that don't know, is an ancient Hindu text. I think it's part of the Vedas, which are like 10,000 years old. They come from like proper like ancient India. And the Bhagavad Gita is probably the most well-known Indian text. And the story is Arjuna, who is the main character, and Krishna, which is the Indian god. And they're on a battlefield, and they're about to have a war. And Arjuna's the leader of this war, and he sees his enemies in front of him, and his enemies are actually his family. His enemies are the people he grew up with, and they're all fighting for this part of land in India. And he turns to Krishna, who is his driver, or the guy that takes him around in a horse and carriage. And he's like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to hurt these people. And the rest of the Bhagavad Gita is the dialects and the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, and it's all Arjuna just throwing questions at Krishna about his worries, about his insecurities, about the nature of reality. And Krishna, who is the reincarnation of God, is just answering them and putting him to ease. And the reason that they've used the terrain and example of a war is because it's a metaphor for the war going on in our own mind. And it's so fascinating how they've done that, how they it's on a battlefield. Why would an ancient holy religious text be talking about battlefield? It's because the war going on in our mind is a pure battlefield. It's one of we think we're separate from others. So how this comes from the illusion of lack is that the Bhagavad Gita really says and focuses on we are all one. Everything in reality is one, right? We're all connected. So if we're all connected, how can we be separate from others? The idea that we are separate, that we are this conscious observer behind our face, behind our eyes, looking out at nature, looking out at other people, is an identification to our own egocentric mind. It's an identification to our ego. So the illusion of lack comes from when we forget the fact that we are all one. We're all from the same pot of atoms and particles that came from the Big Bang, and it's all exploding and arised, and we're all connected from this reality, which the Bhagavad Gita is saying is God. We're all God. Everything is one. And why it causes suffering, this illusion of lack, when we think we're separate from other people, it causes suffering because then we have to do things to get feelings and love from other people. So if we are all one, we are all love, we are all one being. There is no difference between me and you. No, I wouldn't want to hurt you because that would in return be hurting me. There is no such thing as you and me. That is just an ego that has been fabricated in our own mind through a process of evolution. So if we're all one, everything's connected in reality, right? And we're just this ego that's like forgetting this. When you identify with this ego looks out of the world and thinks, right, I need things from the world. I need to be liked. I need to be loved. And can you see how when you need things, it subconsciously assumes that you lack something? It's saying that you don't have things, that you lack. And this causes suffering because when you lack something, it shows that you don't have that and you need to go and get things. And that's why people have this such need for validation. If you realize the true nature of reality and realize everyone's one, and your ego is the same as the other person's ego, we're all in this together, we're all at the foothold of reality, then you wouldn't feel the need to go out and impress others or to try and get love from other people. You wouldn't feel insulted by other people. You wouldn't feel hurt by other people because you realize that everything is one and we're all here together. And when you can tap into this like state of being, this like state of love that is the oneness of reality, it takes away the self-conscious mind. And I experienced this in my meditation retreat. So on day 7 on the meditation retreat, like I'd been sat there now for 7 days, meditating 12 to 15 hours a day. And I am in such a weird state of mind right now. Like I've got a lot of insecurities popping up, memories from school that I never even knew were in the back of my mind, all come into my conscious experience. I'm dealing with this, I'm processing with it. And I sat in one of the meditations, in one of the hour meditations, and I had this feeling of pure vibration. I could feel every atom in my body vibrating. And the next thing I know, I had a pain in my leg. And I realized that I'm up here and the pain is down there. And then I realized that I'm not even up here. I am everything. And when I had that realization, I came to a point where I could feel the whole room. The idea of me disappeared and I was reality. I was the vibrational frequency of what the universe is. And when I was in that state, the idea of loving myself more than the person in front of me or the person next to me didn't make any sense because I was everything. I was one. So that illusion of lack is what causes all of your suffering. That separateness of I am Alex Rogers and that's that person over there and I need to act like this so this person likes me. That is all causing you suffering. You don't lack anything. You are completely fine. All your suffering comes from your identification and attachment to the ego that wants to be impressed, wants to be liked. And the ego is there to help you. It wants you to be safe. It is essential to have an ego. It can become a very like dogmatic thing to say that, oh, the ego's nasty, like the ego is the enemy. The ego is essential for human survival. If you didn't have an ego, you'd feel no need to go out there and pick berries and throw spears at animals and hunter-gatherer and survive. Like it's been evolved from a process of natural selection to help us survive, but we need to realize that the ego is not us. It's a part of the oneness of reality, but is not you. You are everything. So yeah, the illusion of lack causes suffering. Next is psychedelics and meditations. And psychedelics and meditation are tools, not the answer. So I don't know how many of you have done psychedelics, but when you really get and see the profound nature of psychedelics and meditation, you start to have this spiritual emergence where you realize the true profound nature of these substances or the true profound nature of deep meditation. And it can show you things about yourself and show you things about the nature of reality that are just so far out your comprehension that you feel like you are kind of leveling up, and they do level you up. Psychedelics and meditation are beautiful tools. Like if you can use especially psychedelics correctly, they can show you insights into part of your mind that you couldn't perceive were there. They can unlock emotions. They can really alleviate a lot of suffering, and a lot of deep meditation gets you there as well. But when you fall into these ideas that, and you start to believe that these are the answer, then you kind of form this separate sense of ego that thinks that they are everything. And it's like, I've got this fear, so I just need to meditate more. I just need to sit there with my mind and kind of let this fear come up and just wish it away. Let's just let it arise. If I sit there with it long enough, like it will go away. And I've done a lot of meditation, a lot of psychedelics, and I can tell you that whilst they do help and whilst they do give you a keen insight, there is a lot of implementation that's needed with both of these. And the insights you get from psychedelics, the insights you get from deep meditation need to be applied into your day-to-day life. You need to live your life and use these tools and use the lessons that you learn from these tools productively into your life and integrate them as a person. They're not just going to magically snap you out of being socially anxious. It's not going to magically snap you out of being depressed. that is debatable with psychedelics. Like, there is people who have done psychedelics and lost all form of like anxiety. Like, these things can show you things, but for most people, for most therapeutic uses, they're going to be used to give you an insight to how to improve your life, and you're going to have to proactively and productively improve your life by being pragmatic and integrating the lessons you've learned. You can't just take these things. They're not just going to, or you can't just take psychedelics or just meditate loads and it's not going to instantly make your life better. It's a process of integrating and living life. You are a human having a human existence. So you need to do human things and interact with humans to overcome the barriers of the mind. But these can be great tools to understand that, but they're not the answer. The next is another one by Chris Williamson. I don't know if I've mentioned some of these I get from Chris Williamson because I listen to his podcast all the time. If you haven't listened to it, it's called Modern Wisdom. I love it. It's probably my favorite podcast. This guy is someone I model myself off massively, and I really appreciate the work he's putting in, and is someone I aspire to be like, and is a big reason why I started this podcast. So yeah, listen to Modern Wisdom if you haven't. So the next is the inner citadel, and this is fascinating. This is such a cool way of looking at the mind. So I'm going to try and explain this, and I've not actually really explored it in my own terms and my own articulation, so this might be a bit messy, but stick with me. So the idea of the inner citadel is when someone can't have something and they've tried and they have the realization that they just can't achieve it, what they do is, instead of admitting that they just aren't ready for that, or they've not tried hard enough, or they're not good enough, what they do is they retreat into the back of their mind and say that the pursuit of that thing is wrong and no one should do it. Because they can't achieve it, no one else should have it. And they start creating a bad narrative around that thing, and they become an enemy against it. Instead of looking at people that have that with admiration and respect and think, wow, that person really grinded and he achieved that, and that person really did this, they go, oh, that person shouldn't be doing this, he shouldn't be doing that. The idea of this and that is completely wrong. And a good example is when people are fat and they're overweight and they try to lose weight and they're not losing weight, instead of admitting that they have a severe lack of knowledge around how to lose weight, or they haven't tried hard enough, or they're doing something wrong, what they do is they retreat into their own mental narratives. They retreat into the back of their mind and start saying that anyone who fat shames them is ridiculous, or any body positivity should be promoted. Everyone should be fat. If you're skinny, if you've got a six pack, you're against fat people. And can you see how they're retreating into their inner citadel? They're closing in the barriers of their mind from perceiving what is possible, and they're putting up blockages for other people, and they're cultivating an idea that's saying like, they're wrong, you can't do this. Let's say if you lost a leg and you knew you couldn't get another leg. That's like you retreating and going, no one should have legs. Everyone should be legless. Everyone should have one leg. It's like, no, you just haven't got a leg. Or no, you're just fat. Like, it is what it is. Like, you are a bit overweight at this time. There's a lack in your knowledge. There's a lack in your motivation. There's an emotional attachment to food that you've got that maybe you need to work through. Instead of becoming consciously aware of that, they retreat into the inner citadel and they're like, everyone should be fat. They should respect me. Like, I get treated like this and that. And that's how the inner citadel stops you from seeing reality. And you see it everywhere, especially now with all the ideologies that are coming on from the gender, all the genders that are going on, and all the fat phobic stuff, and like a lot of it is people retreating into their inner citadel. So yeah, it is interesting. I don't really know if I explained that very well, but that is my interpretation of the inner citadel. The next one is the power of vulnerability, and I share this a lot on my podcast, and the big reason why I think people resonate with the podcast is because I'm very vulnerable and I'm very raw, and I share my personal and emotional experiences. And this came from the meditation retreat. Before, I was so concerned about keeping up this persona of being this funny party lad, or this person who's doing well, who's going to the gym and blah 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 and is really confident. I was so concerned with keeping that up that I created this persona, this character of someone who wasn't me, and I was constantly performing. I was constantly trying to make people perceive me in certain ways. And obviously I still do this, everyone still does this to a certain extent, and it's something I'm trying to unravel. But I found when I was in the meditation retreat, a lot of just letting my anxieties come up and letting them come in my conscious experience and noting them and going, wow, like you are socially anxious in that situation. Like that is what is happening. Like you are socially anxious right now. And that's fine. Like, and then I started telling people, came on the podcast, started talking about social anxiety. Like I remember I've recorded this first Instagram video and oh my God, I was so scared. Like I made a few Instagram posts about just me in the gym or talking about my fitness journey. And then I wanted to make one about social anxiety because it had been such a big problem that I'd had to deal with my whole life. And I was hoping that if I could just share it, it would give me power over it, but it would also like help other people. And I remember sitting in front of the camera thinking, everyone's going to think I'm weird. Everyone's going to know I had social anxiety. Like, what was going on? And I've recorded it and put it on there. And ever since I did that video, I've been so much more comfortable about sharing my social anxiety. And paradoxically, through like owning up to it and confronting it and talking to people, I now have the ability to use it as a tool. I have the ability to use it as my power. I have the ability to connect with people on a deeper level because I can share emotional issues. And people just want you to be raw and real and listen to them. And when you're stepping out the way of your ego and your logical, rational mind and you're sharing your emotions, you're being vulnerable, people see that as admirable. People love and respect that. And the ability to like let this vulnerability come up and share it with others. And like when you're not feeling good, like share it with people. When you're feeling sad, share it with people. It really does just alleviate the pressure because you being brave enough to tell that to someone else has shown that you are not attached to that emotion. And by detaching away from the emotion, you finally give yourself power over it because you realize it's not you. So we're letting that emotion rise, observing it, sharing it, going, I feel or I'm experiencing anxiety today. I've been really anxious. Maybe take away the I, stop identifying with it and go, there is an experience of anxiety. I got it when I was speaking to this girl, and you share that to someone. There we are. Like, it's not you. It's just something that's experienced, and like there's something that was in your conscious experience. You didn't have the attachment to it, of it being something to be ashamed of because you've shared it for someone else to judge. And now you can move on and look at that and go, wow, like I'm not attached to that. I'm not attached to the idea that someone's going to judge me for this. I'm not creating shame around this idea. And there we are. You're freeing up your mind. You're freeing up your ego. You're freeing up your ability to detach away from things. Paradoxically, the next lesson is the danger of manifesting vulnerability. And this is something I found like sharing the podcast and something where I actually spoke to a Jungian psychologist and he was helping me kind of digest this, which is like these things can come self-fulfilling prophecy. So I talk a lot about social anxiety. I talk a lot about how I overcame this situation. I got anxiety in this situation, and how much of me talking about these things, how much of me giving importance to these things is actually reinforcing the idea that I am socially anxious or that I am afraid or I'm not confident. Like when I keep saying all these things, like words carry power with them, right? Every word that you have has an emotional attachment to it. It's got a vibration and a frequency. And if you've got this idea of anxiety as a bad thing and you're constantly saying I am anxious and you're attaching to the idea of anxiety, that is going to carry power into your reality. And it's going to, the more you repeat that, the more you say it, it is going to build up as evidence of you perceiving the world as you are anxious or you are afraid. So I think you've got to be careful with sharing too much things. And this is something I want to strip back a little bit from the podcast. Still be very vulnerable, still share my problems, but not constantly identifying with the fact that I am anxious, I am afraid, I'm not good at speaking to women, because that has now become a mental narrative that I'm starting to believe. It's something that automatically pops up in my mind when I speak on these podcasts. So I'm sat there and I come up with something. It's like, I'm not very good at speaking to women. So where is that coming from? That is a narrative that I'm now holding about myself in my mind. Maybe it was a subconscious narrative before, and now it's a conscious one. But me reinforcing that and me giving that attention is not doing it any good. So I'm really struggling with that at the moment, with how much do I like detach away from that and like watch my inner mechanics of my own mind, watch the inner conversation. How much do I just like observe all that and not say things like that? Because I feel like it does put me down a little bit, and it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy where I say these words, and as I'm saying these words and I'm communicating with them, I'm creating an idea around them words that is me. The next one is In Praise of Idleness. So I read a book in Australia. So I was in Sydney with my mate Ross, and I went to a bookshop, and he just handed me this book. He went, "Oh, you should buy this." And like, none of us knew what it was about. He just heard of the author before, and it said "In Praise of Idleness," and it was just this like little, just a tiny little book, and it was kind of just like a little essay. I was like, yeah, why not, lad? I'll just give it a read. And it was a guy called Bertrand Russell, and he was like an English philosopher who started a lot of the computer AI stuff. But he was like a really deep, really intellectual philosopher as well. And it was all about how, and I remember this book was fascinating. I read it like 3 or 4 times. And he was talking about it in it, how society and the idea of the work, of how we work, is completely misinformed. And humans work best when they only work a couple hours a day and they have a lot of free time to come up with ideas. When you're constantly in motion, when you're constantly doing things, you don't have the stillness to listen to the ideas and the intuition of your own mind. And what Bertrand Russell was saying is the most creative thinkers, the most fascinating ideas come in times of stillness. They come when you allow yourself to play and you go and enjoy life and you're being free and living with the flow of life. And that's when like the spontaneity comes up with the ideas in your mind. We could kind of see it as ideas, and let's say ideas are their own life force, right? Ideas are floating around in the air and we can't perceive them through our senses, but ideas are beings. They are floating through the air, and that's why sometimes when you put your head on your pillow and you've been working all day and you've been on your phone all day, all these thoughts start coming in your mind and you start coming up with all these crazy ideas. That's because them ideas have been trying to get to your conscious experience all day, but you've been distracting yourself with the responsibilities of life, with the distractions of life, with whatever has arisen in your conscious in your day. All of this has been distracting you away from these ideas that are trying to infiltrate your conscious experience. So think in times of idleness meaning like stillness, not doing anything. You allow your mind to get still, to listen to the whisper of God, and also tap into the ideas that are around your reality. So it's a really good book that I'd recommend people read, and is In Praise of Idleness. The next is The Paradox. Oh, I'm starting to get tired, mate. Like, this is really intellectually challenging. I've just written up lessons that I've wrote, and I've not actually articulated a lot of these. This is the first time I have, and I'm really enjoying this. Like, I feel like I'm really in the flow with it, but it's really tiring. I can feel my mind slowing down as I'm going. So I'm going to get us through as many of these as possible, because we've only done 37 minutes. Right, I'm going to keep going, guys. I'm going to get to an hour, or I'm going to finish all these anyway. The next one is The Paradox of Choice. Why social media causes overwhelm. The consumption of content gives you so many different ideas and so many different perspectives on the world that you can often build up a barrier behind what you're being told and what you're actually seeing. And there's so many ideas getting infiltrated into your mind constantly by the perpetual consumption of social media that you often forget like what you actually want to do, and other people's ideas start overwhelming your mind. So let's use an example as when I wasn't on social media, when I was like just traveling, enjoying myself, I really wanted to be a PT. Like, really wanted to be. I thought like I had clarity of choice. My intuition was telling me to do it. And then I got home and I started posting more content. And then I started listening to all the entrepreneurs and all the other content saying, like, you should have an online business, you shouldn't work, you shouldn't swap your time for money and all this stuff. And now I don't know what to do because I've got so many other ideas in my mind and so many different aspects of things that I can do. I'm being exposed to AI. I'm being exposed to the opportunities in crypto. I'm being exposed to new training modalities. I'm being exposed to the growth of the podcast. I'm being exposed to all these different things, that all these different choices that I can take, that is like paralyzing my conviction. My conviction to know what to do has gone because I'm constantly in a perpetual state of distraction. I don't know what's the right step to take. And maybe this is, now I'm really thinking about it, linking back again to intuition versus logic, because my intuition knows deep down what I need to do, but I'm getting all these logical, rational arguments and all these opportunities that I can abstract and intellectualize, and it's taken me away from the intuition of what I actually need to do. And the paradox of choice is a really good example of some guys like in the 1970s and the 1960s, you'd go into a store, you would have two pairs of jeans, black or white. You would have small, medium, or large. And that's all you would do. That's all you had to choose from. So whilst you couldn't get the perfect fit for you, whilst you couldn't find the exact thing that you need to do, you also didn't have to worry about not picking the right thing. You also didn't have to worry about all the choices you could do. It's the opportunity cost that is baked into the nature of making decisions that really causes us paralysis, because when you stick to one thing with conviction, there is always the idea in your mind that you could go and do something else, that you could go out there and be a boxer. You could go out there and learn how to grow a social media page. You could go out there and be a blogger. You could go out there and go travel. So now you've got all these ideas and you're sending mini versions of you out into future ideals to see if they're any good, and you're not sitting in the now and just sticking to one thing. And I really struggle with this. I really struggle with just sitting down and going, this is what I'm doing, because everything in reality is so fascinating. There's so many opportunities out there that I want to do everything, but the person that does everything does nothing. So maybe a goal of mine for next year, I'm not written all my goals down yet, but I'm going to do soon, is to cut back on my social media use drastically and allow myself to be a lot more still and quiet and follow the intuition and just do the things that I know I should be doing. But yeah, that's the paradox of choice. The next one is clarification of desire. What do you want to want? This is such a cool question. So if you're not sure what you need to do right now, let's say you don't know what to do for a career, you don't know what step to take next, I want you to ask yourself a question, which is, what do you want to want? Because what you want is the programming of society, is the programming of your parents, is the programming of your culture, is your instant gratification desires. What you want is, what do I want right now? When you abstract and extrapolate yourself away from that and go, what do you want to want? It allows you to observe your own desires, push them to a side and go, what would I want me to want? And I think the little detachment away there is so important. So if I was to look at my own experience and go, what do I want to want? If I go, what do I want now? It's, I want loads of money. I want pretty decent car. I want pretty fit girlfriend. All these things go. But when I go, what do I want to want? Already my mind is orientating in a way of, I want something that makes me feel passionate about life. I want something that makes me feel fulfilled. I want to have that. I want Alex to have that. Instead of sitting in my desires, instead of sitting in my instead of sitting in my impulses, I don't know why that word was so hard for me to think. Instead of sitting in my impulses, it allows me to step away from that and go, what do I want to want? Where do I think would best suit my intellectual curiosity or my fulfillment of life or my mindfulness, my attention, my ability to be consciously aware? I think it's a really good question. And the more I've just described that, the more I feel like I need to journal that question. Yeah. The clarification of desire. What do you want to want? The next one is, when times get tough, you see the inner bitch. And any sort of adversity, anything that happens, you'll notice that the context of your mind starts turning into self-limiting beliefs, starts turning into narcissistic ways of viewing the world. Oh, I'm better than other people. Oh, I don't deserve this. I'm different. I'm special. I'm a snowflake. I'm better than everyone. I shouldn't have had this done to me. Adversity really brings out the true beliefs about yourself. And if you look at the existentialist philosophy, it's that we are how we act, not what we say. So if you put yourself in adverse situation, if you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you will find that you will start acting and thinking in ways that don't correlate with the person you want to be. And that's really interesting, because the way you're acting and behaving is truly what you believe, not who you want to be. So you can really get a true conscious awareness of the interior of your mind through putting yourself in hard situations or through going through adversity. So yeah, I think you really see how you have all these tendencies to be narcissistic or to want to have validation from others when you go out and push out your comfort zone. So yeah, you when times get tough, you really do see the inner bitch. I think that's done for me, to be honest. Like, I could keep going. I've got a couple more, but I feel like I'm not giving the best explanations of these now. Yeah, I'm done for that, guys. If I want to record another episode of this, I've had loads of things I've learned this year. I could probably do another one, but for me, that is my time up. Thank you very much for listening, people. This year has been a crazy year. The growth of the podcast has been slow, but I really, really appreciate the people that listen. It's crazy that like someone will spend time to listen to me talk and to listen to my discussions. And I get feedback like, "Oh, your podcast is actually pretty sick," and like, yeah, you're helping me out a lot. And for me, that is just the most amazing thing. Like, someone listens to me for 45 minutes ramble on about my abstractions of reality and get some sort of value out of that and make some sort of change in their life, which makes them a better person. How cool is that? And all we can do is just like make our own little impacts in the world, and that's what I'm planning to do with this podcast. That's what I hope I'm doing. So for everyone that listens, like, I'm not sure if you understand to what extent I appreciate you listening, and I want to start putting more. I keep saying this, and like, this is definitely something I need to work on. Is I do want to start putting more time into the podcast. I feel like if you're giving up your time to listen to me, that I want to serve you as best as possible. I want to give you the best information. I want to do as much research as I can on the episodes. I want to get the best guests that I think are going to help me and help you in return. So the backpacking psychonaut, I'm taking it slow, because with anything in life, like when you try to do things quickly and instantly, you rebound the other way and you end up burning yourself out, or you realize that you're not as good as you thought you was, and it beats up your self-esteem. So I'm trying to do things very slow, just an episode a week, maybe do the editing myself, get better at thumbnails. I'm building up slowly, like really slowly, because I see this project as like a 10-year project. Like in 10 years time, the backpacking psychonaut might be 50,000 listeners per episode, and I'm there just speaking, waffling bollocks to a big population of people. But that might be in like 5 years time, 10 years time. For the moment, I'm happy keeping it like this. I'm happy getting guests on. I'm no rush, because I want this podcast to grow with me. So, and I want you lot to grow with me as well. I think we could build a nice little community eventually. And yeah, I really appreciate the people that listen. So people, have a wonderful Christmas. I hope you will really enjoy the festive holidays. Don't forget that Christmas is a time to relax. Christmas is a time to enjoy yourself, appreciate your surroundings, speak to your family. Like, you don't have to be constantly improving yourself. And yeah, like, set some goals as well. I'm going to do an episode before New Year's with like setting goals. I think it's going to really help, and I might do it like I'm going to do it in a couple of days time. I'm going to do 2 episodes this week, or I'm going to do 2 episodes next week, because I want to help you set your goals for the New Year's and like kind of work around how do I actually stick to things this year and how do I actually get better. So a new episode will be coming out soon. But people, thank you very much for listening. Much love, peace to everyone, and I'll see you all in the next episode.